Hello and welcome to episode 4 of our Break the Isolation webinar series. This is Ensemble Teaching Online with our guest Ingrid Martin. Before we begin, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders both past and present. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Forbes and I'm the State Manager of AMEB Tasmania. This webinar series aims to bring together our community, keep us connected and share creative ideas during these challenging times. You can ask questions today of our guest superstar, share these ideas with other participants, give us some links to extra tips via our live chat function. If you are unfamiliar to Zoom, that's the little speech bubble down the bottom. We will try to respond to these as best we can along the way, but we will have a dedicated question time towards the end. I am delighted to have Ingrid Martin with me today. Ingrid originally trained in a completely different field as a doctor, which has provided her with a unique perspective on problem solving and psychology. She's worked with all levels of ensembles from primary to adult for many years, and she has put that to good use in her online learning platform, Conducting Artistry. Ingrid has been developing online learning for conductors for the past 2 years through Conducting Artistry and is now pivoting that for students. Thank you for joining us, Ingrid, and welcome.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me, and thanks AMEB for hosting such a fantastic series.
It's our pleasure. So straight into it, is it possible to continue teaching ensembles online?
Well, I guess the answer is really yes and no. Can we run a normal rehearsal with like 50 or 60 students on a video conferencing platform and you conduct and they play all at the same time? No, we can't do that. So if you're dreaming of doing that next week, sorry to burst your bubble, but are there ways that we can still work on ensemble skills and help our students continue to develop? Then the answer is yes.
Excellent. That's a really good thing to hear, actually. What are the ways that we can use the online technology to our advantage?
Well, I think it's important for us to consider what is it that we really want our students to learn in ensemble. So usually those are going to be things around listening, knowing repertoire, developing ensemble skills like internal pulse or intonation, being able to play with others. And obviously all of those things are pretty simple when we're doing it in our normal rehearsal format. But what we now have to do is kind of be a bit more creative about our thinking in how can we help students still work on those skills and develop those skills, but given that we're not going to be able to deliver it in person, and depending on what the technology is that your school or ensemble is using, you might not even be able to do that in a live setting. It might be something that you're going to record and then the students are going to interact with later on.
Interesting. So how would you support playing with others, playing along with your conductor, using recordings, those sorts of things? There are a number of issues with latency, obviously. What are your best tips for those sorts of areas?
Well, I think the first thing is to kind of separate out what those different skills are. So if you want your students to be able to practice playing along with a conductor, then the simplest way would be for you to record a video of you conducting maybe a piece that you're working on, or even something more simple. One of the things you might have heard a lot in these discussions about teaching online is about us having to lower our expectations. And I think that's no more true than in this particular setting, because when we're in an ensemble room and you're conducting, the students have a whole lot of other different feedback that is helping them know where they are in the music. They're probably not at the stage where they have the music memorized and they can watch the conductor the whole time. So if they're just watching you conduct silently, they're probably going to get out of time pretty quickly. So having a click track or some kind of other external audio that you can make so that they've got the visual of your conducting, but also an audible pulse is going to be the best way to help students work on following a conductor. If we want students to be able to practice playing with each other, as we know, the latency means that it's really challenging for one person to make a sound and another person to make a sound and for us to listen to them at the same time. That doesn't work. But we can kind of get around that by you could, if you had the whole ensemble in a live meeting, you could be conducting and have everyone else playing, but just have them on mute. And that's certainly a way that you can have everyone making sound. And even if you're, making sound to give them an external pulse to make sure everyone's in the same place. And maybe it's even just giving them beat 1. If you want to, give them a bit more of a challenge. The other thing you can do is get students to do that in small groups or in partners by themselves. So if they have the technology to set up a meeting, and you can do this in Zoom, for example, if you're using breakout rooms, so you can put sections together or pairs of students together, and one student could play and then the other student can play along as long as they're on mute. So the student, they will be able to one of them will be able to have the experience of playing along with another student's sound. Or the other option is to either yourself or have students record one line and then play along with that line. So they're basically getting a duet kind of experience. So they could record one part of the duet themselves and then play along with themselves. Or you could record one line of the duet on whatever your instrument is and then get them to play along to the second line. Or probably that simplest way, if you were kind of low tech, and this is something that you can do even if you don't have any live capacity, is just get the students to play along with a recording of a piece that you're working on. And that would be really helpful, particularly if you've got stuff that you're working on in term 1 that maybe, you're just about to get ready for a performance, or even if you have done a performance, that would be a really good thing to do that will give the students a feeling of success and feeling like they're doing something around the music of the ensemble.
Thanks, that's great. You mentioned about playing with others. In terms of intonation, how can we work with that and develop that skill?
Well, I think that's another opportunity where you can use this idea of duets. So for example, you might have a melody that's from a piece that you're working on in your band or orchestra, and you could record that on your instrument or singing, or play it in on a keyboard, like a MIDI file, and then get the students to play along in unison, first of all, because that would be the most basic thing to practice. And they could record themselves playing along in unison and submit that to you as something that could be assessed. You could also get them to play along with a drone, because one thing we know is that what we want to do is have the students have something to bounce off of, right? If we're doing intonation, hopefully we've worked with our students on playing with a tuner, and that's great for that visual feedback of, am I, high or low on the note? Am I matching the pitch? But we also want them to develop that ability to hear, am I in tune or not? So there's a couple of apps that you can use that are fantastic. Tonal Energy is one that's available on iOS and Android. It costs $5, so it is a purchase one, but that's a fantastic all-in-one tuner, metronome, and it has a function where you can basically pick any note in any octave and pick any type of synthesized sound and then get that sound to sustain. So, you might say, okay, today's or this week's intonation exercise for band is everyone's going to put their drone onto concert F, for instance, if you're doing a band, and we're going to play concert F major scale in semi-breves, going up against the drone really slowly. And your job is to see, can you make that your note sound like there's no beats between your note and that drone note. And obviously you can do that in any key on any scale. That would be a really simple way to do it. And even just getting them to record themselves doing that and then listen back, because particularly if they're younger players, they might, and if you haven't spent a lot of time working on this, they might not have had that experience of hearing like beats versus no beats and that pure sound. So getting them to listen back to themselves will probably give them a better awareness than they have in the actual moment when they're trying to do it on their instrument.
Great. What about skills like internal pulse? How would you recommend developing those through online means?
Well, probably lots of us are hopefully trying to develop that in our rehearsals anyway when we're doing our normal thing. And in fact, some of those exercises that we do can actually be really easily incorporated and almost done in exactly the same way that we would do it in a normal rehearsal in a video context, whether that's a live context or even a pre-record of you just videoing what you normally do in a warm-up. So one that I love to use in normal ensemble rehearsals is getting the ensemble to count out loud. So I know everyone on the call is kind of on mute right now, but you can do this along to have an experience of what this might be like. So we're going to count from 1 to 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Back to 1, 2. And keep doing that out loud. And when I turn my palms down, you're going to keep counting, but you're going to count in your head. And what you can see, if you do have live video and you can see the students, you can get them to show you like what number they were up to when they came back out of the thing. So that means you don't need to unmute them, which will give you a crazy scrambled kind of sound. But you can either get them to show that or get them to just be really obvious with how they're. And you should be able to see, oh, like everyone came back in on 1, or oh, there were like 5 people that came back in on 3. And so you can increase the length of time that you ask the students to count in their head. And, you know, obviously if you're in a live setting, you've got a bit more idea of the feedback of, oh, okay, we got to 3 beats of internal pulse. That was good. 5 was not so good. But you can still do this as a test, and you can set that as a test for students. If you had a pre-record video of you doing this exercise and ask them, oh, how long could you go before you kind of got out or you were not quite sure what was going on? And you could help them by you saying it out loud when you put your hands up as well. So that would be a way for them to check, was I on the right beat when we got to that point or not? That's from a really fantastic book called The Creative Director by Ed Lisk for beginning levels. And in the resources, which I know we're posting a link to, there's a link to that book with that internal pulse exercise. And there are some other ones from that book, like getting the students to play a certain number of beats. So you might say, okay, we're going to play 3 beats of sound and then 3 beats of silence, going up whatever, a scale, for example. And you can alter the amount of beats and the amount of silence. Obviously, the longer the silence gets, the more challenging that is for students in terms of maintaining that internal pulse. And, you know, if the students have not done this before, you can get them to do it with their metronome first. And then the next step of taking away that pulse would be, okay, do it with just the light flashing on the metronome. And then, you know, you could get someone else to do it, or you record the metronome. You could just record the screen of the metronome of, okay, with sound, with just the light, and then you mute the sound on the metronome and then put it back in to see if they came back in the right place.
Terrific, great resources. Thanks, Ingrid. What about getting students to team up with other students to develop sort of listening and awareness, those critical listening activities that we would normally find a lot easier in person?
Well, I think this is a great way for us to kind of streamline our assessment, because I think assessment is going to be one of the challenges. And, you know, I've got my first ensemble online rehearsal is going to be not next week, but the week after. And I'm already thinking about how can I use my time in an effective way. Of course, I want students to be like submitting material and being accountable for what they're doing, but I also don't want to have to, you know, listen to like hours of student videos. So one way would be for students to create videos or even audio recording of themselves playing, and then send that to another student so that they're doing peer assessment with each other. And that could also include that duet activity that we were talking about before. Or you could have an activity where you're getting students to practice being expressive. There's a fantastic resource. It's actually not in the booklet, but I'll add it when we finish the call, called the Feeling Wheel. And it's got a whole bunch of different emotions. And so you might say, okay, everyone, today's or this week's assignment is going to be playing hot cross buns or playing Twinkle Twinkle, something really simple. And you're going to pick an emotion that you're going to play. So maybe you pick angry. And so you're going to record your, whatever it is, your hot cross buns being really angry. But you're not going to say that in the recording. And then you can say, okay, well, Lisa is going to send her recording to Trevor. And then Trevor has to guess what is the character word that Lisa tried to play. And he can give her some like written feedback on, you know, what he thought, why did you think it? And this is getting students to be really critical about not just the sound, but we can start to get them to think about what are the elements that make something tell a particular story. Like if, you know, if he says, oh yeah, well, it was angry. Okay, well, what did Lisa do to make it sound angry? Oh, well, her tone was quite harsh. She had quite hard articulation. She, you know, maybe the sound was scratchy, but also she looked really angry in her face. So we're also getting students to practice and be aware in themselves and others, those non-verbal performing things that are going to really create a special experience for the audience when we get back to a performance. And this is actually one of the great things about us having to now video ourselves so much, and particularly for us as conductors, because everything we do is mostly non-verbal, is this is really challenging us to like see, are we being expressive? Are we telling the story of the music that we really want to tell? And the fact that we're kind of all going to be on screens at the moment, I think is a massive opportunity for us to improve that.
Always a silver lining. Ingrid, we are quickly running out of time, and there are a few more things I want to hear your thoughts on. You mentioned a number of sort of projects there. What about preparing outside of the ensemble time and tasks for students?
Yeah, look, I think there's lots of fantastic resources online about how students can practice themselves just working on their ensemble playing. They're practicing. There's a few on my YouTube channel, which I linked on the document. As well, I think we need to make sure that we're keeping students being social. And so there's a couple of group activities online. Some people have made escape rooms through Google Forms, which might sound really weird. And it's too much for me to explain in detail right now, but there'll be a link in the document where basically students can do a problem solving activity online in groups together, which is going to kind of help with that section cohesion. You know, you could do it section versus section, see who finishes first. You can run little competitions. Kahoot is a fantastic online quiz thing, and students can kind of get points for how quickly they answer a question and how many they answer correctly. And even just running something like a lunchtime or music department corridor, because we all know what that is like at school, where like all the music kids are geeking out together at lunchtime. Just running like an open Zoom meeting once a week that's, you know, an hour with a teacher supervising, and the kids just get an opportunity to chat and also chat with those kids in other year levels, because that's one of the great things about ensemble is that meshing together and those interactions across year levels, that we don't want the kids to miss out on that.
Absolutely not. That's so important. I will just ask one more thing. You had some practical tips for conducting online, such as using and making click tracks. Can you share those with us?
Yeah, so I think if you're trying to do anything where you're conducting to the ensemble, as we said before, they're probably going to need some kind of oral stimulus as well, because they're going to have to look at their music, and when we're working with young musicians and they don't have fully developed internal pulse, likelihood is if you're just doing this, they're going to get out of time. So, I mean, a simple thing, if you're feeling really coordinated, would be, you know, if you're just doing your conducting with the right hand and just clicking with the other hand, or, you know, if you do it the other way around, that's fine as well. or to record yourself doing a silent video of you conducting the piece, and then just record an audio track of you clicking along or tapping along with a metronome, could be another thing. And that's going to be, in a way, more useful than just a click track, which is straight ahead, because then you can do, if there's rits or accelerandos or, you know, spots where you want to change the phrasing, then you've got that flexibility rather than it just being very robotic and not expressive, because we've got enough robotic stuff going on in the world right now.
Too true. Thanks so much, Ingrid. We've had the chat's been going gangbusters. So I've got a few questions from our audience.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, and I don't know if you've had experience with this, but perhaps does using a phone line along with a video help with negating the latency issue?
I haven't tried that before. It might be something that you could experiment with in an individual one-on-one lesson, but I can't imagine that it would be useful in an ensemble setting, because I guess in that ensemble setting you want multiple audio points to be coming at you at once, and you probably can't have 60 phone calls open at the same time.
And I suspect there's probably something also there around which sounds are prioritised, and probably a bit of a garble to
yeah
but if anybody finds out that works, we'd love to
let us know. Yeah. Put it on a comment on the AMB Facebook page.
For sure. Now a question from a teacher. Their education department is discouraging the use of Zoom online with online interactions. Have you had any experience with Google Meet or perhaps other platforms?
I have been, in the last 2 weeks since all this happened, mostly using Zoom. I've done Google Meet a couple of times and it's been all right. I have not tried it with a large number of people tuning in at the same time. I'm also in the position where my school has said no video conferencing. So what I'm going to be doing is mostly pre-recording things with me instructing particular activities for the students to do, and me playing and demonstrating things that I want the students to play along to, as well as having kind of tasks that they can complete that are either Google Forms or like online quizzes, or they're submitting a recording back. And one thing which I've seen but I have not investigated myself yet that is supposed to be great for submitting videos is called Flipgrid. So again, I'll add a link to that in the resource when we finish for people.
Fantastic, thank you. And in terms of communicating with students and parents, just keeping them up to date and involved, do you have a preferred platform that you use for that or method?
Well, my school, it's a government school in Victoria, uses Compass. And that's the way that the school has asked us to communicate with students and parents. So I think most of us are operating within a school environment. So I would say go with whatever is what your school has recommended. Those online learning platforms are useful because usually it's got the whole group and you can just message the whole group at any one time. And sometimes they also have a news feed feature if you don't want to spam people's inboxes, but I would try and be really clear about the communication, be clear about when you want them to communicate with you and when you're going to get back to them. Because one of the challenges of us working online is, you know, we don't want to be contactable all the time. We want like work to stay at work, even though it's at home. So being clear about, oh, I'm working from these hours, I will respond to email about band or whatever from these particular hours. If you don't get a response from me in X number of days, you know, please message me again, that kind of thing.
Excellent. And actually mental health being so important, we've got another webinar about that next week, so I'll mention more about that later. But we have had one of our teachers just make a comment, if you're not following the chat, that they tried the phone option earlier this week and there was still a lag issue. So unfortunately not a potential solution there, but we'll certainly keep looking. But Ingrid, do you use an external microphone while teaching on Zoom for better sound quality?
Well, right now I'm just using it on my computer microphone. I did buy a microphone last week, which I've had trouble setting up, and I think I'm even a pretty tech savvy person. So I think particularly for you as the conductor, probably the two things that you're going to be doing are talking to the camera maybe singing and playing your instrument, so 3 things. So if you're playing your instrument, I think it would just be doing a bit of testing. If you are using Zoom, for example, you can record the meeting if you're hosting it. So you could do a meeting that's just you, record it, and then listen back to check what the sound is like. But just think about your positioning, like maybe you have to walk backwards a bit from the computer so it's not so loud and the sound doesn't distort. Or maybe if you've got something separate that the sound recording is really important, you can record that separately and put the video tracks together in a simple video editor like Windows Movie Maker or iMovie.
Great suggestions. And I'll just also mention from an AMEB perspective as well, that if you are recording any lessons or things through Zoom or similar, your school may well have permissions, but any parent should be giving a permission for anyone under 18, and individuals over 18 should be giving permissions. So just before we get all the notes about that one. Okay, we've probably got time for one, maybe 2 more questions. Do you have any tips on best recording practice for students when they record or submit their recordings for sharing? And in particular, any free apps that work better than others in your experience?
I would first of all just try and get the students to record it on whatever is simplest for them. Like their phone is probably the easiest thing, or if they've got a tablet or, you know, one of those like tablet computers, record it on that. You be specific in your request as to whether you want it to be audio or video, and know what those 2 different things are going to be, showing or not showing is really important. This Flipgrid, which I've not investigated at length, but lots of conductors in America who have been teaching online for about 3 or 4 weeks now have been saying that is a fantastic platform for students to upload and submit video. And I think the great thing about getting students to use the video thing is the only one thing you need to tell them is look at it before you submit it. Because often they'll go, oh, and it will actually mean that they practice, because they'll do it like 3 or 4 times until they get it the best that they want it. So this is actually a fantastic practice tool, which we should be using anyway, getting people to record themselves. Now's the opportunity.
What a great excuse. Well, thank you so much, Ingrid. Remember, we are here to help at AMEB during this time. Our website, ameb.edu.au, has a special page. If you go to /here-to-help, lots of useful resources for teachers, students and parents to keep the music alive during this time. Details about Ingrid's conducting artistry and any other links and resources Ingrid has suggested will all be on our Break the Isolation part of that website. And don't forget to join us for next week's webinars. The lovely Alana is about to pop some links in the chat for you, but they are teaching speech and drama, and we'll have guest Victoria Clancy, and also, as I mentioned, wellbeing and connection during social isolation with Greta Bradman, the soprano and psychologist. You can register now or visit our website for more details on those. And we hope you'll join us to break the isolation and continue staying connected then. Thanks so much to our team in the background today, and a special thanks to Ingrid for being with me, and particularly to all of you who have joined us and all your great input via the chat as well. Stay well, stay connected.